All right, so I was just watching a documentary about Salvador Dali. I was just watching this documentary about Salvador Dali entitled Dali's Greatest Secret. Dali said, I believe in the resurrection of bodies. I desire eternal afterlife with the persistence of memory. Salvador Dali. That's an interesting, certainly interesting quote. The documentary is playing in front of me now, but I want to talk about what I what ideas or thoughts were triggered by watching this documentary. Number one, the documentary is about a painting. I find that really inspiring and very interesting that they would focus on one painting of Salvador Dali's. All right, one painting. I would like to do the same with the painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat. I'd like to have a documentary specifically about that painting and all of the interpretations or what I read in the in the painting, you know, with relation to Nipsey, with relation to just like everything, like interpret it, study it, really, get some ideas going, rather than have it, be overlooked or just treated as if it's just another one of Basquiat's artwork. No, study it, look at it, it's really important. What I'm noticing, what I noticed about Salvador Dali's work is the um, the subject of religion, the subject um, of spirituality, and Salvador Dali, the way he presented himself, um, as a madman, a wild man, crazy, a genius, certainly, but also a you know a man fascinated with science and mysticism. Mysticism is a point that I want to um, ponder, think about, because that mysticism, mystic, the mystery of life, that harkens back to what Albert Einstein, what I, excuse me, what I read about. There's that famous quote by Albert Einstein. Um, I don't know if it's in this book, but I found the quote online, and Albert Einstein said, life is a mystery. The meaning of life, you know. It says here, the ordinary objects of human endeavor, property, outward success, luxury, have always seemed to me contemptible. All right, that's a different quote. Here we go. This is what I'm talking about. Here, Albert Einstein, The World as I See It. Albert Einstein wrote, the fairest fair. It's unfair, it's fair. The fairest. The fairest thing we can experience is the mysterious. This is what Albert Einstein said. The fairest thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Mysterious. Mysticism, I think, mysts. I think those two words, if you look at the etymology, those two words probably are connected, right? MYS, mysticism, mysterious, right? Here we have Albert Einstein, the greatest mind of the 20th century, talking about mysterious nature of life. And then you have a great artist, one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, Salvador Dali. Um, his artwork, his persona, his, you know, is all imbued with mysticism, right? So they're talking about Matthew the seminarian here. They're showing him on the screen, Matthew the seminarian. I have this thing about, Matthew, the name Matthew. Like, I remember when I worked in Korea, my bosses, I always had a number of bosses whose names were Matthew. And it was like, because they were my boss and because they were my, yeah, they were my bosses, and they were above me, it always felt like I was always under a Matthew layer, some layer of Matthews. You know. So now in this movie here we have Matthew the seminarian that they're referring to and talking, but whatever, just a coincidence. This movie, this documentary is about one painting, right? Something to do with a vision of hell, something to do with Fatima, right? I just watched it. This is my first time watching it, so I don't have all the details, mapped out or whatever. Um, but I find it so fascinating that in Portugal, the story goes three children had a vision. They saw something in the sky. They had a vision and they communicated that vision to the elders, the adults, and the prophecy came true. At least there were three children, and part of the prophecy said that two of the children will die, soon. How soon, time, I don't know how you want to judge it, but it certainly came true because later on in their lives, two of those children, there was only one surviving, child. They were adults at that time. They lived to be adults, but two died, and there was one left, and it was kind of within line with the prophecy, not within the time limit. That reminds me. Nipsey says like things will happen not within the time limit. Nipsey was talking about success. He said you always want it to happen, but you don't know when it's gonna happen. Anywho, this prophecy, this story about these three children has led to a pilgrimage in Portugal, has led to a lot of religious activity, and that's what the documentary is about. It's a fascinating documentary, but the idea that um, these children had a vision, they shared the vision with other people, prophecies came to fruition or came to pass. It's fascinating. Then the reason why Salvador Dali is included in the story is because part of the vision that these children had, you see, they sought these the this well, this child grew to be an adult, but the child, this now adult, had the desire to share the prophet or the vision, and someone said, well, we need a visual representation of this vision, or rather a visual representation of hell, because in that vision those children had a vision of hell, and they said we need an artist um, to draw to express that vision. It wasn't the exact same vision, but it was certainly a vision of hell that Salvador Dali, later produced. There's so many more details, but I'm fascinated because I have a painting that I would like, you know, the world to focus on and study. I've had not only certainly I've had a vision, and I've had all of this, spiritual, I've had all of these mysterious things happen that I'm passionate about, what I'm talking about. And it needs to be studied. It needs to be, you know, um, examined. Because if they can do this, if they can focus as they're doing, shoot, why not? Why not me? Why not my vision and my uh, interpretation? I don't think it's. I don't want to just say that it's an interpretation, but it's. But the painting and the coincidences and the you know the persistence of memory, like Salvador Dali says, the persistence of memory. That's what truly is important throughout time. The persistence of memory. We have to remember ourselves. This is the we have to remember who we were. We have to remember who we were in Africa. We have to remember that, where we are today is not uh, what it's not a where we are today is not a function um, of what of our conception. We didn't devise this. The nation of gods and earth say that we are in a wilderness. This is the conception. This is the reality. Tupac called it white man's world. We're not in um, a world of our conception, of our creation. So, so we have to remember who we are in order to survive, in order for us to thrive, in order for us to, rise above. We must remember who we are. I find it also fascinating that in this documentary they said that Salvador Dali's woman, wife, partner, life partner, whatever, Gala. Gala prayed too, and Gala was very religious, and Gala prayed to the Russian. She had an icon representing the Virgin Mary. That it was the Russian interpretation. It was the something. There was some connection with Russia because her Madonna, the Virgin Mary that she prayed to and that she looked to, it was the Black Madonna. Gala. Salvador Dali's woman prayed to the Black Madonna. Can you imagine that? I would hope that more people know of the Black Madonna and would also pray to the Black Madonna. You know, shout out to Christina Cleveland and her movement and journey to bring people closer to the Black Madonna from an international perspective. Dr. Christina Cleveland has traveled the globe searching for depictions of the Black Madonna to bring back to us here in the wilderness of America. Um, Salvador Dali. I've got to talk about my connection to Salvador Dali. First off, I have this book, and Salvador Dali, I knew of him as a child because this book belongs to my father. And my dad, at some point, said that Salvador Dali was his favorite artist. And so our family living room was covered with works of art, reproductions, prints, and the like of Salvador Dali's work. But nevertheless, they were certainly Salvador Dali's works, and that's how I learned about Salvador Dali. Like this painting here, we have some print or something of it. Um, you know, this is the six apparitions of Lenin on a Picasso. No, no, excuse me, on a piano. Sorry. So anyhow, fascinating stuff. Um, is that the? No, that's the dream. I think it's either the dream or persistence of memory. That is a painting, very familiar, very famous one of Salvador Dali, but it's really tiny. It's so small. You look at these pictures and you think that these are massive works, and then the reality is it's a very small painting. It's like, what? It's really small. Um, Anywho, So my dad, this is my dad's book, and I remember I grew up looking at Salvador Dali's work. So in 2018, when I traveled to Spain, I made it a point to visit the Salvador Dali Museum. And part of that trip, I went from the Salvador Dali Museum to Salvador Dali, one of his homes. And I got an education. I learned more about him, and I walked where I walked in the man's home, and so that was a fascinating, revelation and opportunity to learn about his life. But then that also brought me closer to his spirit. Brought me closer to his spirit. Now here's something that's really coincidental. Check this out. So this documentary was made about a painting, and that painting had been hidden away from the public for 30 some odd years. And then it was revealed in the year that I graduated from high school, 1997. It was revealed to the public. It was brought out and said, hey, this is a famous painting by Salvador Dali in 1997. I think that's a very interesting detail because part of my 10-9 stories is this connection to Che Guevara. So I was okay. Wait a minute. Let's first Salvador Dali. I was in Spain. I was in Salvador Dali's home. Okay, I had no idea about this painting, that it was so interesting, and that it was connected to a vision that these children had, and that it's such a religious painting. I did, or yes, it's such a religious painting. I didn't know anything about that. But hearing this story reminds me of my story of 10-9 and how similar it is. Okay? But that's Salvador Dali. All right? But those are the connections. In 1997, the painting was reintroduced to the public after 30 years or so. All right. With that said, when I traveled to Cuba in Havana, I was there. I was reading the book about Che Guevara's life when I realized that he was killed on October 9th. I learned that when I was in Cuba, and I felt like our spirits, were somehow, communicating. Like, wow, how is it that I was able to visit Cuba? Like, it was, I felt as if my travel to my trip to Cuba was not in vain. There was a greater calling for me to have gone to Cuba, and it was for me to make the connection with Che Guevara's spirit. In much the same way as my trip to Spain, you know, I had learned and seen Salvador Dali's work all of my life, and it was a pilgrimage. It was necessary for me to go on this tour, and there I was in the man's home, connecting to his story, his life, his spirit, the same way, right? All right, now here's the connection between Che Guevara and Salvador Dali. In 1997, Che Guevara's body was exhumed. It was exhumed in, I think, Bolivia. Well, he was killed in Bolivia, obviously, but it was exhumed, and then it was repatriated and buried in Havana, Cuba. Now, Havana, Cuba is where Che Guevara's legacy really bloomed and blossomed, because he led the Cuban Revolution. And if you travel to Cuba, as I've done, you'll see Che Guevara's image all over the island, as a representation of like this is truly his home, even though his home was in Argentina. But it was 1997 when his body was exhumed out of a grave in Bolivia, and the bones, his remains, were repatriated to Cuba. Now, the point in that story is this: when I was in Cuba in 2017, Che Guevara's bones, his remains, were also in Cuba. So just as I was in Cuba when Che Guevara was in Cuba. I was in Spain in well, I was in Spain in Salvador Dali's home, but I was at his museum where his remains are. You know, I'm probably making more of this than I'm making. This is much ado about nothing because no matter where we walk in the world, there are remains. I mean, even in America, we don't know it, but there are graves, slaves graves, you know, all around. We travel through the South. We travel through, you know, maybe parts of California, and there are graves that we walk on that we are unaware of. So there are lives, and there are connections all the way through. But I just thought it was interesting that I can tell the story, and I can tell the distinction between, um, Salvador Dali and Che Guevara. Not a distinction, but I can bring them together in peculiar fashions. There I was in Spain with Salvador Dali. There I was in Cuba with Che Guevara. That's what I'm saying. So that's really interesting. And then the story, the fact that there's so much religion, packed into this painting of Salvador Dali, as well as his career, and and what he was expressing. It's fascinating. Lastly, I'll say that Salvador Dali was impacted by world events. World events shaped his art, shaped his ideals. He was he was focusing on, nuclear and atomic. He was focusing on what was is that chemistry, nuclear fission. He's like, is that physics? He was focusing on that aspect. You can see the paintings where he's trying to convey the ideal of molecules, molecular structures. These dots represent, who we are, what we are. All right, but on a molecular, on an atomic level. He was a very deep thinker, um, but his shift in focus to at atomic energy was led by 1945's atomic bomb, the dropping of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Again, two cities I visited. All right, in like I've traveled, I've been to these places. That's another connection. But then the greater connection to the story of 10-9 is that all of the scientists who worked to bring the atomic bomb to fruition, who worked on that project, they all went to New Mexico, and they all had to walk through the same door. Door address 109 East Palace in, was it Santa Fe, New Mexico. Che Guevara died October 9th. That's the 10-9 connection. The atomic bomb was created, and the door through which all of the scientists, it was a clandestine operation. All of the scientists who worked on the project went through door 109 or 10-9 in New Mexico. What is the connection to 10-9 and Salvador Dali? There isn't a specific 10-9 story. Wait. Just as I said that, I just thought about it. When I made my way to Spain, in Spain, I arrived in Madrid. In Madrid, I snapped a photo. It was my 1090th picture that I posted to Instagram. Immediately after walking outside of the hotel, I turned the corner, and there was a car parked right there with the number 1090 on the license plate. That's my Spanish connection to 10-9. It was on that same trip that I went to visit Salvador Dali's museum and his home. So I have a 10-9 story related to Salvador Dali. I have a 10-9 story related to Che Guevara. I have a 10-9 story related to the atomic bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 10-9, y'all. 10-9. But I want to focus on this painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat. I want people to focus on that painting the way that they focused on Salvador Dali's painting, because there's so much baked in there, so much meaning and so much importance to the culture, to all of us. And then it also it harkens back to the truth. It is the truth. But I guess as long as we have the truth and we know the truth, it doesn't matter what is in the world. As long as we know the truth, maybe, maybe, maybe. But if you don't know the truth, like even this story here says, you know what? It's a matter of like converting one person. If you're able to communicate your ideals and it changes one person, or it gives something to one person, then it was a success. So that's what's important. That's what's important, yo. Salvador Dali.